it is important that states like Maryland that have the ability to look at their maps, that we have a chance to do it. And it is why I'm urging the Maryland Senate to be able to let democracy not die in the free state and allow a vote to happen on the Maryland Senate, and that people should have the opportunity to know that governors and mayors and attorneys general, that in this moment we've got to understand the assignment and understand what is at stake right now.
Well, let's talk about that redistricting. You are pushing hard to redraw Maryland's congressional map to further benefit Democrats. And what that means is eliminating the only Republican-held seat that exists right now. The map as it stands is already really gerrymandered, done before you got there. How is it good for democracy to pursue a map that makes your state even less representative?
Well, actually, the map that the Maryland House passed would actually make 6 of the 8 congressional districts more competitive than less. And frankly, one of the most gerrymandered seats inside of the state of Maryland is actually the Republican seat. It's Andy Harris's seat, who voted against national redistricting reform. But what the Maryland delegate and Maryland House did is they actually said, let's debate it, let's discuss it, and then let's take a vote. This idea that the Maryland Senate won't even take a vote on this is just, it does not make any sense to me and does not make sense to many Marylanders. And in fact, just last week, we saw how the Maryland Senate found time to debate and vote who was going to win the Super Bowl, but could not find time to debate the future of democracy.
And I just want to make sure that people who aren't totally familiar with the makeup of the legislature in Maryland understand that you're talking about the Democratic leaders, the Democratic leader in particular, in your home state. So this is, an internal party divide on this. And I know you mentioned that you think that some of the congressional districts will be more competitive, but ultimately you're trying to push out the only Republican who is serving there.
I just want to reiterate the points that have been made by several of my colleagues that this map is not about reform. This map is not about fairness. This is a reactionary response triggered by the current administration. I have a master's degree in leadership, and any leadership course I've ever taken says that leadership should be proactive, not reactive. But I want to go back to a comment that was made that says that this current map serves to protect Republicans and disenfranchises black people. That framing was very misleading. I want to just say for your information that black people are not a monolith. Black people are Democrats, independents, and yes, Republicans. In fact, across this country, the number of black voters switching or registering as independent and Republicans has more than doubled over the past decade. And I can tell you in my personal experience, I get calls on a regular basis from black Democrats who tell me they are sick and tired. And they ask me, how can they get involved in the Republican Party? How can they switch parties? I get those calls on a regular basis.
Redistricting in Maryland is always a fight. Maryland is kind of a weird shaped state to start off with. So there's no equal districts, that kind of thing. But the Republicans have centered themselves around the northern part and western of Maryland. And then, of course, on the eastern shore and some of southern Maryland, and sprinkles throughout the rest of Maryland. But generally, the central part of Maryland is heavily Democrat, definitely so blue. It's doggone turquoise. I mean, it's crazy blue. And they vote straight party line. They don't care if the person is convicted, what have you. So for a very long time, we had what we call the broken wing pterodactyl. And it was one of the most horrible maps in the entire nation. So what they did successfully is they took the middle part of the state and add little pieces to every Republican area so that we really did not have a strategic chance to win. In comes Larry Hogan, who was our Republican governor 2 terms. We did redistricting during the census year. We had some really decent maps, none of which got any traction. The governor settled for a crappy map. The map that we currently have, very crappy. We have 1 Republican district and 2, if we work real hard and the stars line up, we might elect the Republican districts. Maryland used to be a 4-4 state, believe it or not. But Wes Moore doesn't really care about Maryland. His focus is on national prominence. And he promised Newsom that this is what he was going to do, and all eyes on what's going to happen. If Maryland's quote unquote Supreme Court.
I have a quick question before you move on there. So for people who don't understand, when you said that, back in the day when they did the first redistricting or the previous redistricting,
Mhm.
they took Republicans and I'm sorry, Democrats, I thought you said, and scattered them
Uh-huh.
around. Can
Yeah.
you talk about why that makes it hard for Republicans to get elected when they do
So
that?
for sure. So most of the Democrats live in densely populated areas.
Mhm.
Many people who even live outside of the DMV have heard of Prince George's County. It's one of the wealthiest Black enclaves anywhere in the nation, mostly because a lot of them work for the Fed. But it's densely populated. So them taking, 200, 300,000 people and sliding it up into a Republican area means that the Republicans' votes don't count as much. So while there'll be a bigger landmass of Republicans, this really small piece of Prince George's County has more people, more votes. So it topples the votes, topples the will of the Republicans in that area. The rub is that our districts are supposed to be people who are in kind, not
Mhm.
necessarily share a landmass, but have similar cultures, similar mores, things that we need. So it doesn't really make sense to have a filthy rich Black enclave mixed in with people who live in a rural area whose biggest concern is, power lines and power companies encroaching on their land, when Prince George's has problems like crime, schools, the concerns are different. So this is what makes these maps egregious, and this is why they routinely have gotten an F since Maryland is no longer a 4-4. We used to have 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and now we have 7 and 1, and they'd very much like to get rid of Andy Harris, who represents a part of the Eastern Shore. And that's easily done by putting in just a little bit more of Anne Arundel County and maybe a slice of Baltimore, since they're there. Might as well add a few little extras. So people have submitted maps from all over the state, and they've decided on the map that the governor's team drew up, which eradicates any chance of a Republican win. That doesn't mean that if you work really hard as a Republican candidate, if you're running in a D+16, D+20 district, you can work as hard as you want to. That just means for every one Republican vote, there are 20 Democrat votes that you have to overcome. So it makes it incredibly difficult to win. And they do it purposely. Gerrymandering is a thing, and it silences the will of the people who live in that area. I know because I live in Steny Hoyer's district. He's been the congressman since I've been alive. I mean, that's how long he's sat in that seat. And they've already put a crown on the guy that's supposed to take his place. Ask me if he's from Southern Maryland.
Wow. Yeah, Shelley, you heard a delegate Congolo talking about how when we spoke, you said this in your testimony last week, the Democrats and Governor Wes Moore are framing this as if this is equity. It's about, the previous map was silencing Black voices, and now this is about equity. And LaToya was pushing back against that. Can you elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, it's bullshit. Okay, it's just plain bullshit. Governor Moore is trying to sell us a bridge over top of the bridge that fell. He's trying to make it seem like it's there, and we, driving over. And what are you going to do? You're going to drown, God forbid. This is how they frame everything. Governor Moore has one agenda. He wants to be president, certainly on a national ticket. Okay, that's pretty much what he wants. He does not give a damn about Maryland. This is all under the guise of equality and fairness. He's only speaking to his people, his choir, all of those people who were on that in that testimony last week. Most of them who were for this monstrosity known as the redistricting bill that LaToya so eloquently put down, and rightfully so. And let me say this is going to do nothing. Like you said, KJ, how much bluer can you get in Maryland? Or what we need to do is make sure that the Republicans, independents, and even if you are fair-minded, you should be upset about this, because even your win, so to speak, is not really a clean win. You can't even win fairly without cheating in a blue state. I mean, how like you said, how much more can you get of this? It's a blue state. You had the 7-1 advantage. My rudimentary math calculation goes like this. There are about 6 million people in Maryland. If you break it down to the 23 plus 1, Baltimore City, 23 counties, you have about 250,000, give or take, people in every out of those 8 districts. Why can't we do just simple math? I contend that you can't do simple math because Baltimore City and Maryland schools are not teaching math anyway. So therefore, it's all messed up.
I mean, there are lots of things that they have to follow. You know, that there are majority minority districts rules that they have to follow, and rejoining Southern Maryland with the Eastern Shore can't happen now because the Bay is in between us. Although we have similar cultures, similar needs, they've taken advantage of every single federal law to gerrymander this state into absolute Democrat dominance. And it's not enough for them to control the legislature. They gutted the governor's power when Larry Hogan was governor to ensure that if there's ever another elected Republican, he's going to have to dance to the tune of the legislature. And now removing the one winnable being a word, Republican seat, it just smacks of disenchantment of every single voter. Every single voter, not just the Republicans, like Shelley was saying. You know, if I were a Democrat voter here, I would think, man, eventually this pendulum is going to swing the other way, because that is what happens with pendulums. And what happens when the Republicans get in control? That would be my question. I mean, let's look at it at a national scale. They were flying high when Biden was, quote unquote, the president, right? The pendulum has swung the other way. It's bound to happen in this state too. I'm going to tell you, elephants never forget. We're going to remember this moment.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, ladies, because we talked about this on here. We know that they are also doing a mid-election cycle redistricting in Texas. What's the difference? I mean, are we being partisan here? What is the difference between Maryland doing it versus Texas? I want to get your thoughts on that, Nicole.
There isn't. Listen, gerrymandering is wrong no matter where you do it. And when I talk about this, I'm not talking about it from a partisan point. I'm talking about it from an American point, right? It's supposed to be one American, one vote. That's the way it's supposed to be. And my vote should be about what happens in my community. When you send a representative to Congress, they're supposed to represent a district. That means that district has a certain set of problems. Everybody meets with him. You send him an email, text message, however you want to communicate. So these are the things that we want you to take care of. And you send them into Congress to go fight with everybody else to bring back your community's portion of pork, right? This is what Congress does. Well, what happens when the community is so vast or so different that what I need may fly in the face of what the next person needs because they live in a different place and their needs are different, but we're now all jammed into one district. I mean, Southern Maryland needs metro access like we need a hole in the head. But Prince George's County absolutely has to have metro access because they're urban, they're populous. Well, if you live in the country, you don't really need a metro train. That's not what we need. We don't need any of that. So that's an example of how when we make these districts not focused, this is what happens. So your person goes to Congress, and does he battle for transportation money or does he not? Does he battle for rural health care? What does the battle become? Or does he battle for a little bit of everything and hold up every single bill in Congress? Because this is what happens in Congress. They're fighting over so much because their districts are so gerrymandered. They can't come home without something for this group or something for that group and something for this other group. It's only because we allow them to draw these maps that don't make any sense. And it is simply for political gain. And it's wrong regardless of who does it.
And I want to add to that. One of the things I think with Texas that may be slightly different, I don't know to what degree this matters. Texas's legislature, they are only in session every other year, I think on the odd years. They're not in session every year like Maryland for 90 days. So that may be one thing. So maybe they're trying to capture those votes or capture that population. They've had a lot of in-migration from other states, California, other states surrounding them. They've had a lot of in-migration. So maybe they were trying to capture that. that may be a pro reason. But Nicole is right. Whoever does it, whenever you do it, there's so many laws and rules and whatever. I've said many times, you got so many rules and laws, you don't know which one you're really checking off or not checking off. By the time you finish figuring out, it looks like a whole web, a whole ball of mess. And who suffers? The citizens. The citizens and the residents suffer. We are the ones who get kicked in the butt every day going time.
Right. And one thing that's different is the Texas redistricting map did go to court. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they found that it was lawful. Now, legal experts are saying if the same thing happens to here in Maryland, we may not get the same result. It looks like people are saying this map here in Maryland is just atrocious. It's way out of what it's supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah. Maryland has always had the craziest maps. I mean, since think back the days of Paris Glendenning, the maps have always been. It's one thing when you have a majority, right? And then you have dissenting opposition voices that kind of try to keep you honest a little bit. But when you have a super majority and you can do whatever you want to do, this is what happens. Unchecked power. This is what happens with unchecked power. This is why it is so important for Republican people to vote. It is I know people tell me all the time, I feel like my vote doesn't count. This is why they feel like their vote doesn't count, because they've been blended in with this larger urban area that even if only 10% of them vote, they overwhelm the vote of the conservative voices. I get it, but you still have to vote, because you might get lucky like they did down in Texas. You might get yourself an ice storm and the Democrats stay home and the Republicans might pull a win out of somewhere. Or you find somebody that's palatable enough to, what we used to call blue dog Democrats and end up with a Larry Hogan, who was not the strongest Republican governor, let's just say that, but at least he had the R behind his name. And we did have some influence in certain situations with him. But this map, if it gets past Maryland's version of the Supreme Court, I would be very surprised. Yeah. Very, very surprised.
One more thing, KJ, my last thing.
Well, you have some super chatters here too.
Okay, to your point about the different districts or the courts, courts talking about these different maps. Keep in mind that every state or different states are in different districts or regions or whatever. So this is why it's also important for us to vote. No, we don't necessarily elect federal judges, but we do appoint the person who does, or we do elect the person who does appoint them. And this is why downstream voting, if you will, makes a big difference, because every district, Maryland is in one district or one region, Texas in another. Two different judges, two different districts could vote totally opposite using the same criteria, if you will.
Be leaders ourselves.
Black women are being used by the Democrat Party.
All of these socioeconomic indicators are in the negative, particularly for Black people. They want mob rule. When Trump was in office, please somebody tell me, what act of dictatorship did he perform?
She had Donald Trump's hair on top of her head. And she's sitting here talking about brown girl this, brown girl that.
Because she's a Black woman.
They would ask her how to spell her first name and clap like sea monkeys.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.